morning, ladies, and thanks for taking the time to join us this morning. Congratulations on graduating from our doctorate in physical therapy program 2 weeks ago. We're proud and grateful for your commitment to the college. And thanks, Dr. Kaloji, for taking the time to be with us this morning. What I wanted to do is talk about the experience that you had relative to your clinical training, your internship in Italy, study abroad. And Dr. Kaloji, your thoughts and how that actually came to fruition, and then we'll talk about what your experience included and so on. So, Dr. Kaloji, maybe you could first tell us about what went on to make this happen.
Sure. Actually, it was very much student-driven. Rachel and Emma had attended a professional conference that I also attended, and during that session they had spoken to one of the coordinators whose actual business is to organize internships in Italy. So they made the initial contact and brought information back to me and asked if I'd look into it, and being that I'm a strong advocate of experiencing different cultures, as my background, my PhD is in medical anthropology, I said, of course, we can look into that. So we made the contacts, but it was really the girls' initiative all along that kind of kept the ball rolling. And Italy seemed like an area that we had never sent students to in the past. In the past, we've sent students to Australia and Ireland for physical therapy internships, but never to a culture where English was not the first language. So I thought that would be a very interesting experience, and the director there also is very much into total immersion so that the students don't have to be native Italian speakers in order to experience the clinical internship. So that's how it initially came to be.
So ladies, as the Vice President for Academic Affairs and Dean of the College, I'm proud of you, but I'm most proud that I'm also a physical therapist, and I was a faculty member at the college for several years, and then the chair of the department, and then moved along in administration. So I have a special place in my heart for our physical therapy students. But what you did is really a first. So our program began in 1972, and we graduated students with a bachelor's degree, and then in 2004 we graduated our first class of doctors of physical therapy. And to my knowledge, we've never had students travel abroad to complete one of their clinical internships, especially linked to the think tank project. So before we get into your experience, I thought I'll just mention a think tank project is an opportunity for our students to work with a faculty member on a particular research initiative. And students have an opportunity to write a proposal with the faculty member and then submit it to the Office of Academic Affairs, and then relative to the merit of the project, the student can propose a budget that would allow funding to support their initiative. And in your case, you did that, and we did fund, your think tank project, and I think that perhaps facilitated your decision and your ability to move on into this study abroad project. So Dr. Kaloji was your faculty sponsor, and that all seemed to work. So I know in physical therapy you typically do 4 internships in total, one at the end of your 4th year, one at the end of your 5th year, both 9 weeks long, and then you do 2 9-week experiences in your spring semester of your 6th year. So at Daemen College we have a physical therapy program where students at the end of their 4th year graduate with a Bachelor's of Science degree, and then at the end of the 6th year you graduate with a doctorate in physical therapy. So that's the projection that you went through and so on. So now that we've done all the talking, tell us about your experience. Rachel, what did you think?
I thought it was a unique experience because we got to not only experience PT clinical, but it was a PT clinical in a country that has a healthcare system that was different than our own. So that was really something that was unique and different about this experience, and to be able to see how patients are treated and how physical therapy works in a country where they have a universal healthcare system, and they don't have to worry as much about insurance and patients getting cut for not meeting goals. And it was really nice to be able to just really focus on the patients.
So Emma, tell us how you had this idea that you wanted to do an internship. You just simply didn't want to visit a country or even get engaged with an academic endeavor such as study abroad, but you wanted to do something that had a research orientation relative to physical therapy. So how did that idea mature?
Well, we all talked about it when we first decided to go to Italy, and we had thought about doing research just to see the differences between the healthcare and how PT works in the US versus in Italy. And our research was mainly because we didn't know about the physical therapy in Italy, and we didn't know how reimbursement and how just different things like insurance with a universal healthcare system worked for patients who are going to physical therapy in different settings, like a subacute setting or an outpatient setting. So our research focused mainly on just finding those differences and seeing how the patients and the therapists thought it worked well in Italy versus what we had experienced through our other clinicals of how the patients and therapists thought insurance and reimbursement worked in the US.
So you had already completed 2 9-week rotations,
Yes.
correct? And then you had this thought, you knew that you'd be scheduling your 2 9-week, 18-week experience for your spring semester 6th year, and then you began meeting with Dr. Kalogi to develop this idea and eventually write and submit a think tank proposal.
Yes.
So Dr. Kalogi, what did you think of the idea when it was first?
Well, I was kind of excited because, as you know, studying abroad is an expensive endeavor to begin with. Yes, you would say that, yes. So the opportunity to try and get some funding to go abroad and then to really look at, to look at the culture of healthcare, as well as you talked about the reimbursement, those kinds of things, but also to really get the perspective of the physical therapist there. And I think everything that's happening here in the United States with all the changes that are happening in healthcare now, I think we can learn lots of really interesting ways and unique ways of maybe addressing issues that we're not currently doing now here in the United States. So I think sometimes it's nice to not be so ethnocentric and to see other environments and to try to pick and choose things that are appropriate. So I think the opportunity had to do that kind of research. So we started with one particular idea of research, and then you know how things go with research. We had to retool it a little bit different, but I think both Emma and Rachel came away feeling like they really were immersed in a very different way of delivering healthcare. It was kind of nice because they were still able to meet all of the objectives for all of your, for the clinical internship, but in a very different environment. And it seems that from the interactions that I had, we did some Skype interviews with both the students and the clinical instructor while they were out there, and actually we've gotten wonderful feedback from them that they kind of felt that our students were the most prepared of all of the physical therapy students that they've had at that particular Italian healthcare center, and that program has been in place, I think, since 2007 or 2008. So for them to say that really was a testament to the initiative that the girls took, and I really think that it was a special kind of experience for you because of that.
So you knew of the site, or did the students come to you with this is a clinic that does this type of thing?
No, it was all because of the student. I had read something about these kinds of programs, but like I said, the students were at a national conference and had met with this gentleman who runs these kinds of programs to kind of link U.S. physical therapy colleges and universities to the to two very specific Italian rehabilitation centers that are about an hour from each other, both in the Tuscany area or some around there. So it was really student driven. I just kind of was the conduit to get it all, get all the paperwork in and those kinds of things. So, and actually because of the work these ladies did, we have 2 additional students that will be taking advantage of doing some internships. We just got that approval a couple weeks ago. So there'll be 2 students who will be in their final year next spring that will be doing internships at the same facility that Em and Rachel are in. So that's kind of nice.
So the 3 of you work together on this project. You put together the paperwork, and then off you go, and you land in Italy. And do either of you speak Italian?
No.
We took a class in Buffalo through a cultural center here, and it was 10 lessons, and we learned a lot of verbs and nouns, and that's basically it. We learned a few phrases like "my name is" and "where's the bathroom," "where's the hospital," "where's," just phrases to get around. And we had our guidebooks that had phrases in it, but we didn't really know a whole lot. Both of our instructors spoke English and Italian while we were there, so they did a lot of translating in the beginning. But we were pretty happy that by the end we could understand what the patients were saying to us and to other therapists, and what other therapists were saying to each other, just by knowing a few words before going there and then hearing it constantly while we were there for 9 weeks. And even though we couldn't have a full conversation with the patients, we could get our points across with cues to get the exercises and activities we wanted, and we could understand what they were saying and how they were responding to the activities.
So it's interesting because the patient may not have understood English, and you may not have really understood or were able to speak at that depth in Italian, but somehow it still worked. And there are patients that you see that have had cerebral accidents or different events that have lost the ability to verbalize, but can still follow nonverbal communication. So that's terrific. So your preceptors, your clinical instructors, and your patients, that seemed to evolve well. What did you see as a difference? So you went through a very rigorous, I think, well established and grounded program. Now you go to another country and you're working with physical therapists who have been trained in another environment. What do you think?
I thought there was kind of a wide variety. At the place that we were at, there was probably about close to 20 PTs working at a given time. And you could kind of in the U.S., some people take their schooling very seriously and other people probably not so much. And it really depended on the therapist, I think, as to how much preparation, how much education they really wanted. And like our clinical instructors, I think, were 2 of the therapists at the facility that had really taken their education seriously and gone on after they graduated to get additional certifications. And so we learned a lot from them. And I really thought that they were very well prepared. Then there were other therapists there that you could see maybe hadn't really gone on to do a lot of continuing education, and they were probably not as well prepared, I would guess, but we learned from 2 of the therapists there that I think were better, as good, if not better, than any clinical instructor that I had in the U.S.
And here with our curriculum, it's broken down into 4 practice patterns: musculoskeletal, neuromuscular, cardiopulmonary, and integument. And you're trained to work in all of those disciplines as a generalist. Is it the same there in Italy? Do they see orthopedic and rehab?
Yeah, especially at the site we were at, they saw a lot of orthopedic conditions as well as a lot of neurological conditions. The cardiopulm section wasn't as prevalent there, but it may have just been the site we were at. They still knew how to work with patients who were using oxygen and who needed to increase their endurance. And they had learned all of that, but just the site we were at wasn't as prevalent with that. And then in Italy, they don't actually do wound care as physical therapists. So the integument section wasn't as well taught and as well learned by the therapists that we were with, but they were very interested to hear that in the U.S. we can do wound care and we can do things like debridement and e-stim and stuff to get rid of the wounds and help heal them faster.
So now I've gone to school quite a while back, but things that we learned in neuro rehab, like bow bath and Brunstrom, are those techniques, NDT, and are those still techniques that are international?
Yeah. They, at the site that we were at, they told us, I think our first or second week that we were there, we sat down and just talked about like some of the techniques that we use in the U.S. versus some of the techniques that they used in Italy, specifically with patients with neurological conditions. And they use primarily bow bath. They also have another technique that they use that we didn't learn about in school. It's called Profetti, and it's an Italian-based PT came up with the technique. It reminded us both of kind of the motor relearning program, but you needed very specific types of patients to work with this specific technique, and you needed a lot of time. And time was something that they had more of in Italy, but even there they said a lot of times they just didn't have the time to work with the patient as in depth as you would have to in order for the Profetti technique to really work.
And do you think that the experience was of mutual benefit? That you certainly learned new techniques there, and do you believe that the staff may have learned something from you?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We gave our in-service to them on the U.S. healthcare system, and I know one of our clinical instructors, I think she already had a pretty good idea of the U.S. healthcare system, but our other clinical instructor, he was younger and he's never been to the U.S. before, and I think that he really didn't know. He thought he knew about the U.S. healthcare system, but as we were giving our in-service to him, I think a lot of things he didn't know, and some of it surprised him, and some of it allowed us, all four of us, to have a pretty good conversation about the differences between the U.S. and the Italian healthcare systems and the pros and cons of each of them. And I think we all got a lot out of that conversation.
So now the million-dollar question: what would you see as the glaring differences between the U.S. and the Italian health system with regards to a patient in need of rehabilitation?
I think the biggest thing is time, and not having to prove that the patient is meeting specific functional goals in order to keep them on therapy. And I know Emma and I have mentioned it. We've mentioned it to Dr. Kolodziej. I think we mentioned it in our presentation before, that we had one specific patient who had a spinal cord injury, and she sticks out in both of our minds as someone in the U.S. that probably would have gotten cut from therapy quite early on because she just couldn't. She had complete loss, maybe grade 1-ish movement in her right lower extremity, and she only had a little bit in her left. And we couldn't really get her to meet a lot of functional goals for a while. And then we kept working with her. We did basically whatever we could to get her to move her lower extremities. And by our last day there, she was able to stand up with a walker and take one step. And that was huge for us because she couldn't even sit and swing her leg out in front of her when we first started working with her. And then
that took about a
3
month
4 weeks
to do that, and she would have not lasted a month in a subacute facility here because of insurance reasons.
DRGs
exactly.
And time, yeah.
And then about a month after we returned to the U.S., we got a video text message from our clinical instructor because she wanted us to see that she could walk now with Lofgren crutches. And so that's huge. Like she went from nothing to being able to walk. And in the U.S., we both agree she wouldn't have been on PT as long as she was there, especially because the first couple weeks she really wasn't making any goals at all.
Yeah, what a great gift.
Yeah, and that took 2 months of intensive therapy. She got an hour and a half of therapy a day, and that's not something that she would have gotten here. And it's just because she wouldn't have been able to functionally be doing activities for an hour and a half a day. And so there we were able to do some stretching and take our time and do some massage to really loosen everything up and make her feel relaxed so that she could put the effort into work to try and even just lift her leg off the table. So that was really cool to see the difference, that if you do have the time and you don't have to worry about constantly writing notes to prove functional gains and functional progress, that you can see this actual progress in a patient.
Yeah, that's terrific. How did the patients first respond to you? So here are two American aspiring doctors of physical therapy, and you're in their clinic and you're working with them.
I think in general, they were all very excited about it. I think a lot of people, the clinic that we were at was known for having American students because they have students pretty much year round. So I think a lot of people already knew that there were going to be American students there, but they loved it. A lot of them wanted to try and to practice their English with us, which kind of made it difficult because we wanted to practice our Italian. But yeah, I think they, for the most part, they really enjoyed working with us.
Yeah, and I think the therapists enjoyed it too. There were, we had our two instructors who spoke English really well, but there were a few other therapists that knew some English, and one had lived in Australia for a little bit, so he knew more than some of the others. But this was, our instructors told us this was one of the first times that the other therapists really came out of their shells and started speaking English to us, and so we were able to help them work on their English. And the few that really knew English pretty well, we could work on more grammar things and help them to correct what they were saying. And they would tell us, because we knew what they were saying, if their grammar was off or their sentence was out of order. But they told us, like, correct me if I'm wrong, because I want to know how to say this correctly. So it was cool just to help them learn some English and us learn some Italian at the same time.
It sounds terrific. Were there, and you mentioned that, you know, the therapists were somewhat diverse in their experience and so on. Were there folks from other countries? There were some that had some training, like in Australia and things like that. But were there therapists other than Italian?
Nope, they were all from Italy. One of the things that was interesting, though, was that they also had Italian PT students at the same time that they had us. We overlapped for like our first couple weeks there. So that was kind of interesting because we could see what their students were like or what their education was like, and they could see what we were like.
And did you enjoy conversation with them, and that were they
Yeah.
inquisitive and
Yeah.
you know what your education entailed? And
Yeah, we talked a lot with them about the differences between both of our educational systems. They were kind of in the same point, I think, where we were, like finishing up their last year of school, so we were right at the same point.
So clinically and professionally, it sounds that it was a tremendous experience. So here you are in Italy. Where were you?
We were in kind of like the middle of Tuscany. We were an hour north of Florence, up a mountain. So we were, I mean, the closest town to us was down the mountain, about 30 minutes, and then that was probably considered a very small town by U.S. standards. But we were in the mountain in a small town that's a summer town, so most of the stores and houses were closed up for the winter, and the population was mainly at the facility we were at, living in the long-term care or the assisted living there. So it was quite an experience, because I know both of us have done our last few clinicals in Rochester or in Buffalo, and those are big cities compared to what we were in. And so it was just a very different experience to go to a corner store and pay a lot of money for groceries that if we had gone an hour to Florence, we could have gotten at a huge supermarket for a lot cheaper. So it was just very different from what we were used to. But it was nice to be in Tuscany because we did get to see the mountains and the meadows, and we took there's a path right by our site where we stayed, and you were in a meadow, and then there were mountains just on the horizon, and our view outside of the facility was amazing. So it was just very hard to leave, too.
So if you
Leaving
climb
that.
atop one of those mountains, you could look to your right and see Switzerland, and to your left and see Germany.
Maybe.
Maybe.
But you didn't do that.
No, we didn't go any farther up the mountain.
So your work day was what? Would typically are the therapists treating patients Monday through Friday? Or?
Yeah, they would treat patients Monday through Friday, but at the facility that we were at, they only worked 5-hour shifts generally. So there would be a group of therapists that would work from 8 to 1 in the morning, and then another group of therapists that would work from 2 to 7 in the afternoons. And that was their shift. So in order for us to get the number of hours that we needed for our clinical, we worked with one clinical instructor in the morning and then another one in the afternoons so that we had the right amount of hours.
And that's because Dr. Kaloji watches every minute.
Well, they were also really good about letting us travel because we wanted to travel on the weekends, and we didn't have a car, so we were taking the buses, and we relied on the bus schedule for that. And so we were able to figure out the bus schedule our first week there, and then the weeks after that, we could choose how late we wanted to work on Friday afternoons so that we could make the bus to make our train schedules. And the therapists were great. Our instructors, they didn't care at all. They just wanted to know what days we were going to stay later and work more hours versus if we were going to be able to work a normal shift all week. So it was very nice that they encouraged us to travel, and they gave us different cities to go to that we hadn't thought of before and told us what to do in certain cities and stuff. So that was really nice.
And you had never been there before.
No.
So you did this on your own, and you navigated your way around and so on. And so where else did you see leisurely? What did you do?
We traveled every weekend.
Yeah.
So we went to a lot of cities. We went to Florence a lot. We ended up knowing our way around Florence pretty well by the end of the trip. But we went to Rome, and we went to a small town, Anzio, which is just a little beach town. We went to Pisa because it was only about an hour train ride from where we were, and we couldn't leave Italy without going to Pisa. So.
And then we went to Viareggio, which is right near Pisa, because we realized that all there is in Pisa is the tower. So actually that was one of the towns that our clinical instructor had recommended that we go to. We saw Venice, we saw Verona, and then I think both of our favorite part of the trip was we took a weekend and we hiked in the Cinque Terre, which are 5 towns on the Mediterranean, and they're all connected by a hiking path. So we both enjoyed that a lot.
It was a lot of fun.
Interesting. So Anzio was a huge battle. We talked about World War II, and a lot of British lost their lives and so on. It was a tank battle. And was there any sense of the spirit behind that loss?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. What would you say?
There's actually a museum in the town, a World War II museum. And I think all throughout the town there were little plaques here and there commemorating certain battles and certain losses. And we went that weekend, we were actually with our parents, so our parents really enjoyed the history behind everything in that town.
So here you go to Italy, you make all these arrangements, through the college, and because of your own efforts and so on, and you find a way to wrap this around a research initiative and so on. And you're in Italy, and your parents come and visit.
Yeah.
I think they were most excited about that part. They were willing to support us and help us figure out all the research we had to do and all of the technicalities we had to figure out with the school and the facility and everything, just so that they could come and travel around.
And have they ever been to Italy?
No.
My dad had, but my mom hadn't, so.
So you're like pioneers.
Yeah.
Forged the way.
They were very happy that we had figured out the train schedules and the bus schedules and the driving and everything before they got there, because then they didn't have to do it themselves.
So you've chosen to do this international experience, one of 4 internships. Was it worth it?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Would you recommend it to
Definitely.
future students?
Yeah.
I would definitely recommend it.
I tell my mom all the time if I spoke better Italian, I would move back to Italy and work there.
Our instructors offered us a job, so they said we just had to go learn Italian, but that won't be happening. But they did offer it. They liked us a lot.
Did the event change you at all? You went there with with an incredible amount of experience and life experience as well, And then you did that, and then you came back. Did it change you?
We were actually talking about
Yeah,
this
we actually
a few
were
weeks
talking
ago.
about this a couple weeks ago. I think both of us originally, before the whole Italian experience, we were comfortable kind of just staying in Buffalo or Rochester after we graduated and not really doing much else. And then after we got back from Italy, we both decided, you know, maybe this isn't where we want to stay. And I know I don't want to stay in Rochester anymore, and I always thought that I was going to stay in Rochester forever. But now I've been looking at different places to work instead of Rochester because I want to travel and I want to see other things just besides what I've seen my whole life.
Emma,
Yeah,
what do you
I
think?
feel the same way. I wanted to stay in Buffalo or Rochester when I graduated, at least for a few years, to get some experience and have the support of my family and my friends. I mean, most of our friends are staying in Buffalo or Rochester, and so I thought that would just be the best place. But now I'm open to going wherever. I mean, I'm looking at jobs all along the East Coast. I never thought I'd be saying, like, you know, I just graduated. Let me go down to South Carolina now. So it's definitely a changing experience.
Well, one thing I could never leave out of a conversation is food. How was the food?
It was,
It was
really
amazing.
good.
They are definitely the best people to go to if you want to try good food.
Yeah.
Because they really care about their food. Two of the therapists made us dinner one night just so we could have a real Tuscan meal, and we didn't eat until maybe 10 o'clock at night because they were preparing the food all day after work. And so it was just crazy how good it was compared to the same exact type of meal in the U.S. So
Yeah, it was good. And the gelato was good too, obviously.
we got that every weekend and had to try it in every city we traveled to.
Well, it sounds terrific. So we'll have to make a visit just to make sure this is right on
Absolutely,
the other
yes.
side.
But the ladies did mention they had a spare bedroom when I was making those contacts. It just didn't work out. So maybe when the next group of students go, we'll try that. And I hope that they get the chance to work with the same preceptors
I think
that
they
you
will.
ladies worked with, because they just seemed like they had lots of great experience but some variety in there. And that was the one nice thing. We went when they were approved to go there. We weren't exactly sure the kind of rotation it would be. So we asked our students to do different clinicals and different types of rotations, and we just had to kind of be very European about it and say it will be what it will be, and it will be a great experience, but it might not fit exactly into one of the pigeonholes that we're looking for it to be. But it sounded like you had an opportunity that not very many of your classmates would have been afforded here in the States. So I think that like anyone else, when they travel abroad, you just have to be open to ideas and to take in that culture, and hopefully you're no longer, not that you were ethnocentric to begin with, but it's nice to hear that it really was, you know, kind of life-changing for you, that now you have skills, and now you have wanderlust, and you know, the opportunity to travel in the future, you know, will change you even further. So that's wonderful.
And I don't know that there's anyone better to work with students, you know, in these types of experience. Dr. Kaloji's been here at the college for more than 25 years, and she's the director of clinical education, along with being a faculty member, and traveled the world. I know, Terry, you've been all over the world.
I have.
And, you know, I know that there have been students in the past who have been interested in different parts, Ireland and England and Australia, and you know, now Italy, and so we're looking forward to hopefully more students going, you know, abroad and integrating the three components: the academic, the clinical practice, but the research piece, which is, I think, really the recipe to make a curriculum meaningful and purposeful. And I can't say how impressed I am with your experience, and you know, putting it all together, and hearing your story, and so on. So very grateful that you took the time to share it with us this morning. and I wish you the very best. You have your boards coming up, and I'm sure you're both going to do very, very well, on that. And we'll look forward to being your colleague for hopefully many years. So thanks again.
Thank you.
And we'll just close by saying thanks to Dr. Kaloji, thanks to Dr. Emma, thanks to Dr. Rachel. Thanks. Good luck.